Didn't.
The worst thing I have to do.
And I know there are some public health
Yeah.
related issues, and then compliance checks is the one piece that if you're, I don't know if you have involvement in current alcohol and tobacco ones, or if it's just the sheriff or,
Just the sheriff.
okay.
My daughter used to be one of the minors that went around and bought stuff.
Yeah, so I did the sheriff. But I do have money coming, but yeah, there's no attachment truck.
We had her.
Okay,
coming up on
I'm gonna get with Ryan and
Alright.
figure out why I can't.
Law
I
enforcement.
tried every which way.
Huh?
Fish biting good?
Thank you.
Fish biting good?
So.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy.
Yep.
We got third place. Been doing it for like 40 years. That's such a nice lake.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Beautiful.
How did your trial went really well, didn't it?
Yeah.
I saw your thing on Facebook, but I don't have, I couldn't open it. Yeah. Congratulations, right?
Yeah. It's one of the toughest I've ever done.
Oh,
Probably the toughest.
I'll have to see if I can, I'll go to the auditor's office and steal their paper. All right, it's 10 o'clock.
Oh,
I'm gonna call the meeting to order and we'll rise for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't see anybody here for public forum. Is there anybody online, Ryan? Nope, okay. So we're gonna adopt the agenda. Are there any questions on the agenda?
Madam Chair?
Yep.
There is, and members of the board, Dave Minke, County Administrator, if we could add consent agenda item 1D, resolution 24-31, approving application for offsite gambling for Sturgeon Lake Lions. And then there is a correction. And so on regular agenda item number 2, it should be ordinance number 2024-28. And your agenda says 23, so 2024-28, the material in the packet is correct with the correct number.
Are there any other additions or corrections?
I'll move approval.
Thank you, Steve.
1 second.
Thanks, Josh. We have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we need to approve the minutes from May 21st, the regular county board meeting and the summary.
I can move them.
Thanks, Josh.
Second.
That you, Matt?
Yep.
Okay. And so we got Josh and Matt. Are there any questions on those? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Then we have minutes of the boards, committees, and correspondence. We have the Initiative Foundation correspondence for May 14th. The HRA EDA draft minutes, the Pine County Surveyors Report, and the zoning board minutes. Are there any questions or comments on any of those? Now can we have a motion to approve them?
I'll move it.
Thanks,
I'll
Matt.
second.
Thanks, Steve. Got a motion and a second. Again, any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We are on to the consent agenda. Are there any questions on anything on the consent agenda?
I'll move it.
Thanks, Steve.
I'll second.
Thanks, Josh. Once again, any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And we are on to our regular agenda. We have a county ordinance amendment public hearing. Hi,
Thank
Kelly.
you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Kelly Schroeder, County Auditor Treasurer. So before you, this first public hearing and ordinance amendment, it relates to our county zoning ordinance. So if you remember back in 2020, we adopted a county zoning ordinance that we had been working on drafting for about 3 years up to that point. And we had taken kind of a unique approach in Pine County to having a county zoning ordinance in that it was an opt-in option only. So typically county zoning ordinance just cover the county north to south, east to west, but we decided to take a little bit different approach and have it opt in. And so over the years, we've had several jurisdictions opt into that county zoning ordinance. And to me, it's been wonderful because you end up with cities or townships, unfortunately, that end up in sometimes have development pressures and things, and then they go, help us. And previously, when we didn't have a county zoning ordinance even drafted, we'd say, we have no way to help you. And so now at least we have it. And so like Brook Park City, as we're hearing today, they have some pretty good development pressures going on in the city limits. And they called and said, help us. And I said, sure, you can opt into county zoning. And so Mike and I worked with them over the last couple months on developing what they'd want their zoning map to look like. So in your packet, you have a zoning map, which zones the city in several different ways as a commercial area, as a rural town site area where half-acre lots are acceptable, and then a rural residential area, because it is, the city kind of sprawls out more than what you'd actually think driving through the city. And so there's some area that's north of 23 and even south of kind of the original town site area. So the city council put together that map as to how they'd like it zoned under the county zoning ordinance. So before you today, you literally have an amendment to the county zoning ordinance, just having it apply to the city of Brook Park, and then amending our county zoning map to include the map that they've submitted to be zoned as listed. Questions?
My only question is, we then take on the permitting responsibilities and such.
Correct. So we already had septic jurisdiction in the city of Brook Park, so we were already doing that piece. So this just kind of brings it together.
Yep.
And I mean, with a small city like that, I don't expect it to be a high volume or any strain on our staff.
All right.
Are there any other questions for Kelly?
I guess I got one.
Yep.
Have you had any other municipalities interested or not?
Yeah, so that same week that Brook Park passed the resolution, Mike and I actually met with Fleming Township as well. And so I'm not sure which direction they're going to go, but we're in conversation with them. And you know, every once in a while, it comes up, and Fleming Township is actually just having the foresight to have the discussion now. Until, you know, before it's an emergency, not necessarily an emergency, but wait, we want to say in what's going on in our city or township. How do we do that?
We need a motion.
Are there any other questions?
We got to do a public hearing.
And we don't,
Oh,
we have the public hearing. Is there anybody from the public who wants just to speak? I will close the public hearing. One more time, any questions, discussion? Now we need them. Oh,
I
go
got
ahead.
one
Go ahead, Jim.
real quick one, and it's not really even regarding this. Do you know how many counties in the state have county zoning?
I do not.
Okay.
Back when we were working through that county zoning ordinance, I'm sure we had a number, but I
Yeah,
don't know it anymore. And we literally started that process in 2017.
yeah, yeah, I know it was quite a few, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the majority,
I think
probably more than the majority.
Yeah, and I'm sure in the last couple of years, it really has changed. Okay, I can just follow up with you on
Yeah,
that.
sounds good.
That's just my own. I'll make a motion.
I got another question.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
Okay. You mentioned that before you can opt in if the city wanted to opt in, and then when they want to opt out, they still can.
Correct. Yep. So they just have to request.
And then
Opt out.
this, it was the city of Henriette that we helped with their situation out there not too long ago. Was this Henriette or Markville?
Oh, with the road.
With the road, yeah.
Right.
You see, they didn't opt in to
No.
take care of.
So Arna Township actually has the most robust restrictive zoning in Pine County. So that was not a zoning issue at all. That was a road issue.
I see. Okay. And that, all right. So they have some of the strictest,
Right.
but then yet they didn't want to have us
Right. They do not want us to do their zoning stuff
only to help them then with
with the road
the
situation, which are
situation.
two distinct issues.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so we had a motion by Josh.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions? All those in favor to pass amendment, or ordinance number 2024-30? Say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. And then we'll do the shoreland ordinance.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So Kelly Schroeder, again, County Auditor Treasurer. And I think Ryan's getting my presentation brought up. But in your packet as well, you have a red line version of the ordinance. So my
Doing that? by the
Yeah.
way?
You're welcome. So as my presentation works through, I can tell you which page number we're talking about at that time. It really kind of follows the ordinance through as my presentation does though. So just a update as to how we got here, why we're even talking about this. So this has been about a 2-year process of updating our ordinance, and why we undertook this effort was there were some significant discrepancies pointed out between our county shoreland ordinance and state rule or state statute. And I think we're all aware of Mr. Lambert's situation up in Windermere Township, in that they were following the county zoning ordinance, but yet there was conflicting information within our ordinance. And so that was the original undertaking of making sure those discrepancies were taken care of. However, then you're always also looking at what else should we do? And after we get done today, there's still a lot of what else we should do. So literally last week, 2 weeks ago at the zoning board, we started the next conversation of the more that we need to do. And so it's gonna be coming back around before you really quickly, probably, I hope quickly we can get some of those other things done. So as we're looking at other things, one thing that we wanted to do was clarity in some definitions and requirements. If you've ever read an ordinance, you'll notice sometimes you'll read a section and go, but what does that word mean? And sometimes you read a section and then you go to the definitions to find out what that word means, and there's not a definition, or that definition's not helpful to help you understand how you should apply it. So we added a kind of a whole slew of definitions into the ordinance that we'll talk through. We clarified some definitions and added some requirements too. And we'll talk through those. The other piece, and the big piece of this, why we pushed this through for today, is because back in, I believe it was 2018, we amended the shoreland ordinance to make short-term rentals, so like those vacation rental by owners, Airbnb type things, we made them in interim use permit, which seemed great in 2018. But now in 2024, literally our zoning board is bogged down with those applications. We do almost a handful of them every month. We put the same requirements on every single one. The neighbors have the same concerns on every single one. And it's just a very large process for those property owners to go through to get the exact same result we knew they were going to get when we started the process. So the reason we pushed this through without all of the changes we wanted really was to simplify that short-term rental process. And it ends up cheaper for those property owners. It is just a much more streamlined process, and will allow our zoning board to actually tackle other topics besides just short-term rentals with the exact same thing time and time again. So we'll talk about all of those things though here in just a moment. So what changed in the ordinance? So again, we're gonna kind of just walk through the ordinance of what changed. So like the very first change, if you're looking at your page number, starts on page 3. So we updated some terminology with feedlots. So previously it said animal feedlot. And apparently the new lingo isn't animal feedlot, it's agricultural feedlot. So we updated that to agricultural feedlot. But then of course, when you update the word to agricultural feedlot, what does that mean? So then we have to add a definition of agricultural. So those were our first 2 changes that show on page 3. We move on to page 4. We did a lot of work around campgrounds, resorts, event center type things. And some of those changes we didn't get fully to the finish line yet. But we can incorporate some of those changes today. So one of those was to add a definition of a campground, because it's amazing how you can get questions of, is a seasonal type thing where it's 100 lots of park models, is that a campground, or is it only tents as a campground? What is a campground? So we added a definition of campground. We had again in 2018 added this definition, commercial hospitality or event center. And that kind of wrapped in like our wedding venues, our wineries, those types of things. And just simplifying that definition, we changed it to say only event center and kind of simplified that definition some. So that was our changes from page 4. Pages 6 and 7, you'll find your next change in the red line version. And this surrounds home occupations. So previously, the definition of home occupations, the main distinct changes are that the home occupations previously said you could have employees. And I mean, the generally accepted version is it's the occupants of the property or the home is the home occupation. It's, you don't have employees. So it's taking out that employee piece that no, it's the occupants of the property or of the home are doing the home occupation. And then previously, it only allowed that home occupation in the house. And so, for example, if I'm gonna run a welding shop out of my garage, that wasn't a home occupation. We were having to look at that as a commercial use. And so in one respect, it tightened it with, okay, you can't have employees with their home occupation. But then on the next respect, it loosened it of, I can go in my garage and do my home occupation. Moving on to additional definitions, and this is just a whole bunch of added definitions that I think we'll find beneficial as we move into our next phases of changes. Page 7, we added a definition of a hotel or motel. Page 8, we added definitions of a low impact campground. So that was something that I think our zoning board just kind of somewhat invented. So it allows small campgrounds that are tent only to be able to be created in a much simpler process and be allowed in more places. So again, it's tent only, it's very minimal amenities. It's a very small amount of sites, but it just allows that to go in some of those easier processes in more areas. So that low impact campground. We added a definition of manufactured home and a manufactured home park. Added a definition of a marina. And then moving on to page 9, added a definition of a park. So all of these things are things as you read through the ordinance, they were words you got to and then could question of, well, what is a manufactured home? Is that a camper? Is that a double wide? Is that a single wide? What is that? So this just clarifies really all those questions as you're reading through the ordinance of what do we mean by that? Same with park. What is a park? As we move down further on page 10 of the red line version, we added a definition of recreational vehicle, but that really just replaced the definition of travel trailer. So throughout the ordinance, we referenced recreational vehicle and not travel trailer. So it made sense that we should change that to be called a recreational vehicle so it flows throughout the rest of the ordinance rather than defining a travel trailer, which isn't referenced anywhere. And then again, on page 10, added a definition of a resort. One of those things that I think will just add clarity as we move forward to our next phases of changes. On the red line version, page 11, we added a definition of a restaurant. Again, that would seem really clear on what a restaurant is, but you can start to read way between the lines and get gray if you don't have a definition. Again, on page 11, the next change is we had the semi-public use listed. And so we just expanded that a bit to semi-public / public use. So previously under that semi-public use, like that was not referring to any like government type agency or tribal type agency. And so we just added those things in there because sometimes governments do end up providing some of those services that sometimes we normally wouldn't, but we do. And again, added that tribal in there too. Page 12 of the red line version added the definition of a short-term rental. So previously that just fell under our commercial hospitality or event center. So we're pulling that out because we're going to treat those slightly different and not as conditional uses or interim uses. Also on page 12, we updated the language to the significant historical site. So we happen to have somebody from the State Historical Society on our zoning commission board. And so he has a lot of knowledge around that. And so previously it referenced a state agency that doesn't even exist apparently. So he just got us the correct language of what state agency should be asked. So that's all that definition update is. And then our last, I haven't been following along, sorry. There we go. And then our last change that we did, which is on page 13, is we removed the requirement in the surface water oriented commercial use for restaurants having transient docking facility. So previously, if you had a restaurant on the lake, it was called commercial unless it had a docking facility. And our zoning board just thought that was silly. If it's a restaurant on a lake, it's a restaurant on a lake. We want to call it a surface water oriented commercial. Just because it doesn't have more docking facilities. Previously, you wouldn't be able to put, if it didn't have docking facilities, you wouldn't be able to put it in a lot of places. Where by calling it a restaurant is a restaurant, it allows us to put it in that surface water oriented commercial areas. All right. Questions on any of those definitions before I jump ahead?
I have a question on
Sure.
definition. I don't know if I'm following the exact same spot where you guys are at, but when you talk about the 15% impervious surface,
Sure.
the definition of that, I think, has got to be looked at a little more seriously, because currently right now in Sand Lake, we share Sand Lake with Carlton County.
Mhm.
And I believe Carlton County, well, I know Carlton County is using the definition differently
Okay.
than what Windermere Township is and what even the DNR is. And where I bring this up is a gentleman placed riprap on a shoreline to help with the erosion control measures, which is, you know, serious.
Mhm.
And it comes in a dump truck, a load.
Right.
And he then used the same riprap, or just call it big rocks or boulders. He used it around his fire pit and used it for some landscaping, which I think any one of us here would do. It's bought and it's paid for logically. Why wouldn't you? Now there's question where Carlton County is interpreting that as impervious surface because he used it as a landscape item. It's the same rock, came on the same truck. And when it's put in the shoreline used for riprap, the DNR won't let you put any like structure,
Right.
which could be thought of as impervious, like a roof or a sidewalk or a building.
Right.
So that's needs to be addressed.
Okay. Yep,
So
we
it would
can.
be, it would be what, you know, what, we need to get a good solid definition on it, because there's a perfect spot there. The lake's shared by two counties,
Right.
but it's under the same DNR. It's under the same soil and water. I see Paul's here today, and I was gonna bring it up at the soil and water also. But that would need to be looked at for definition.
We'll put that on the list.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. And then we're gonna skip one change and we'll talk, it's a very minor change and we'll talk about that at the end in the minor changes, but we're gonna talk about the major change area, which in your red line version starts on page 35. And literally, if you go to page 35, it's just pages 35 to 41 is just crossed out. Because this is a major change area that is completely new, with how we changed it. So the new stuff starts on page 41. But that stuff that's crossed out previously, it described the different land use districts. So we've got 5 different land use districts. So you've got your special protection districts, what went through, what that district is, what are the permitted uses in the thing. So what can I just do as without needing to do anything special. It went through the conditional uses of what I could do in that district. And so that is, I go to the zoning board, I have a public hearing, they look at it, sometimes give me some restrictions on that use, that type of thing. And so previously our ordinance went from that special protection district, and then it just moved to the next district, the rural residential district, and it brought everything with it from the special protection district down to the next one, and then added a few things. And then we'd go down to the high density residential district and we'd bring everything from the rural residential district and then add a few things. And so it was like a ladder. And so as we worked through this, and the DNR model ordinance doesn't do that anymore. Yes, that was the model ordinance from 1993. That seemed like a good idea, but in reality, when you get to some of these commercial type areas, you don't necessarily want houses in them. But when we're building one district upon the next, you end up with sometimes uses in those districts that you don't necessarily want, but it was just a ladder effect. So now, we replace this entire section, these 6 pages of the ordinance, with something very more succinct and a different thought process behind them. So we still have our same districts and purposes in 4.3, starting on page 41, that describes those districts and the purposes. Letting you guys all turn there. Okay. So on page 41, we start to describe the same districts that we had previously and the purposes of them. However, then once we get through that, as we continue on to page 42, and I think it starts on 41, we end up with these tables. So you'll start to see these tables. And first we start with lakes. And I'm just gonna flip to my next slide. So we start with lakes and we start to break them down by lake type. So we got three different types of lakes in the state. We've got general development lakes, we've got recreational development lakes, and we've got natural environmental lakes. And literally they're categorized by the state as to which lake is what type. And so now rather than looking at just, yep, sorry, are you having trouble?
Yeah, I'm at the wrong 42.
Okay,
Okay,
you're there?
I'll get low.
So previously, again, we didn't care about what kind of lake it was. We just looked at uses and that was it. But the new model now looks at what type of lake is it, and maybe we want to look at the uses differently for the type of lake. So we still have our special protection district. However, as you go down the special protection district, depending on the lake type, you might get a different answer. So the C is it needs a conditional use permit. So that is an application to our zoning board where they have a public hearing. They may or may not give you a permit with certain conditions on it, like you may only operate during these hours and that type of thing. P is it's permitted, you can just do it. You don't have to get any special permit necessarily. As we work through these different tables, you will notice there's not very many places that say N for not permitted. But we'll get to a few of them as we work our way through. So again, these don't go from one table to the next building upon each other. We looked at special protection district. What uses do we want to even think about in that special protection district? And then by lake type, do we want to think about them differently? So in the special protection district, I think as you go down the list, I think it's all exactly the same, because in the special protection district, there is not a lot of development that necessarily happens because we don't have very many of those districts throughout our county. As we move now into the next table, which would be on page 44, which is the land classes in the residential recreational district. Yes, Terry.
Question. So looking at 4.4.1.
Yeah,
Short-term rentals is still under conditional use. Is that still has the C by it?
which,
In the special protection
And a C?
district.
I'm just wondering, for some reason, I was thinking that that wasn't conditional use anymore, that the language got changed.
yep, you're right.
Okay,
Thanks, Terry.
sure.
So we'll get that fixed before we do our final version. So Terry pointed out, as you look at that very first table, the short-term rental, it still says Cs across there for conditional uses. Trying to remember, if that was by design, because this is the special protection district.
Okay.
I might make a call to Skip before we change that to see if that was by design, because it very well might have been by design because it's that special protection district where we're not having a lot of type uses. Like your single family residential is a conditional use there because you're not doing a lot of those residential type uses. So I kind of think it was by design that that's a C there
Okay,
and not an easy permit.
okay, thank you.
So in the lake classes in the residential recreational district, so again, we've always had a residential recreation district, but now we've got it in this table form and we're breaking it down by lake type. And what activities can be done there. So you'll notice here, the short-term rental went to the permitted, so that we're not having to do that whole process like we've been doing. Because a majority of our zoning in Shortlands is that residential recreational.
So that other one was probably very accurate.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have any questions on that one, but again, here, the only difference is that like as you look through the table, it's all exactly the same except for that duplex, triplex, and quad residential. If you get to a natural environmental lake, that's not just a permitted use. You'd need a conditional use to do that because those natural environmental lakes, we don't have a ton of them, but yet there are really rural ones where it's like 4 parcels around a single lake and things like that. So if you're gonna be doing some more of that intensive development, we want to have a conditional use, the ability to oversee it and put conditions on it. High density residential district. So again, as you look down that, it's very similar. Again, your duplex, triplex, quad on lakes in that natural environmental or ends up to be conditional. But otherwise, I think that's very much the same. But as you look through too, sometimes the uses vary slightly. So like on the residential recreational district, for example, you won't see planned unit development. So that is like your apartments or if it's commercial, it would be like a resort, where once you get over to your other districts, you end up with those planned unit development type things. So again, water oriented commercial. So then we're pulling in some more of those commercial type uses with our restaurants and marinas and those types of things. And then page 40. Page 45 ends our land use classes for our lakes. And then because lakes have their 3 different types of lakes. And then we move on to rivers, and there's actually 4 different types of rivers. And again, those are all classified by the DNR. And so we go through the exact same process for the rivers, except for now we're splitting them in 4 different categories for remote rivers, forested rivers, transition, and tributary rivers. So we have those same districts though, the special protection, the residential recreational, the high density, and then the water oriented. Questions on those that big change area of those?
I know you got, that's here someplace, but when does a river become a river and not a creek?
So literally we have every single waterway that the DNR calls a waterway listed in the ordinance. And so literally it tells you what they're considered, whether it's a remote, a forested, transition, or tributary. So I don't for sure know where that line is. But literally every water body that they regulate is listed in that ordinance and tells you what it's considered. All right, my other little miscellaneous changes I wanted to point out, which we skipped one of them first because it's a very minor thing on page 14 of the ordinance in section 3.1.1. Previously, it said that the zoning administrator shall issue a certificate of occupancy, which is not correct terminology for what we do because we do not have building code. So that is a building code term. We issue certificates of compliance. And so it's just literally changing that word occupancy to compliance on page 14. It's just such a minor change. Going through the other changes, which are again, pretty minimal. So page 65, because remember back in our definitions, we changed it from saying an animal feedlot. We changed the terminology to agricultural feedlot. So we just had to change that terminology throughout the ordinance, which this is the only other place that it falls. In section 5.6 is where some additional changes start to happen though. In pages 66 to 67. So previously our home occupations typically were, in some areas they were conditional uses, some areas they were permitted uses, but again, we have typical types of regulations we'd want to put on them. So we just put them in the ordinance. So this gives you performance standards for home occupations. So that section 5.6.6, which is pages 66 to 67 in the red line version, literally goes through those performance standards that the zoning board typically would be looking at and just puts them in ordinance so everybody knows what they are. And then pages 67 to 68, section 5.6.7, that's where that short-term rentals comes in. And that is literally the list of conditions that we've been putting on their interim uses. And so that way it's just put in the ordinance of here are the regulations that we've been rubber stamping time and time and time again. And we're putting them in there. And we're requiring that administrative permit and kind of discusses what that administrative permit looks like with those regulations. And then pages 68 to 70 is standards for campgrounds. And really it separates out those low impact campgrounds and gives the performance standards for those low impact campgrounds. How you become a low impact campground versus a regular campground. And then my last change on page 77, which is just such a minor little change, is literally the statute has this little blurb in there about the expansion of existing PUDs. And so the DNR is requiring we put that little blurb in there. And so, I mean, it is in statute, so there's not a lot we can say about it. You know, we've had a lot of discussion about PUDs, plan unit developments at the zoning board, and really that's a topic that's on the phase 2 that we'll continue talking about here at the end of the month with the zoning board of what do we really want those PUDs to look like and how can we work with the DNR on it? Because we had ideas on how we'd like them to work, but the DNR wasn't up for it. But we'll keep working on it. So that is the changes that have been presented as of today. Again, these are the changes that we'd like to move forward with today. There'll be more changes coming. But this really, the key was we've got some simple things we can do and to simplify that short-term rental process to free up some of our zoning board time and give us a little bit different focus.
Anybody have any questions for Kelly?
No, I just have a comment.
Yes.
I think it's great the way the board and you guys are working through it's like a living document. I think it's gonna always have changes.
Right.
Just because things change.
Ordinances always have changes.
Yeah, and you never get it right the first time through. Then you
Or the
say, well, we
third.
run into this. we run into this. And open to the public input it receives.
Right.
So I think that's good. Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I have a
Jacob?
question. Okay, this is all, I grew up on a lake. I know how noise travels on a lake. I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped around 5, 6, 7 subpart or number C, letter C. You got quiet hours from 9 PM. And then when you jump ahead to, now you have quiet time at 10 PM. Which one are people supposed to go by?
The 9 PM is during the weekday, right?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
is that it? Okay.
Yeah, because we have,
Monday through Thursday.
right.
Right, but, and then, okay, then you got 11, okay.
Yeah.
And then,
Saving grace for the neighbors that have to go to work in the morning.
Yeah.
is it, I mean, noise.
But then we also pulled out those holidays that fall on a Monday, like Memorial Day and Labor Day, and gave that
sure.
the later.
Yeah, it gets busy. Then, the one motorized boat per rental party. And then you can't launch it from the premises. Where they provide a public launch. I was
Right.
just curious. I mean,
Yeah, so that's
I see people
literally
out there.
backing my boat down
Right.
that lot and launching it from there. So if there's a public access, you can't do that. We don't want you doing that.
But the adjacent neighbors on each side can?
Right, so I mean, it's
Different.
private property. It's a bad idea, so when we can regulate it, we'd like to, just because it can promote erosion, it's just not good practice, but I mean, there's a line of private property rights, and so and usually people who own their property, they're gonna do it once a season, where if it's a short-term rental, you're gonna have somebody doing it every weekend.
Sure.
So,
And then the mooring, you can't park a boat. So you're allowed one, but then you can't keep it?
yep, you can keep it there.
Well, number 9, must not provide boat slips or mooring spaces.
Right.
Number 9 on 5, 6, 8. Oh, campgrounds.
And that's the low impact campgrounds.
I got you. Okay. Then, of course, just the other thing, just I guess the riprap, like I said, being concerned right here, maintain impervious service areas no greater than 50% of lot or project area. Just some clear definition on.
Right. Yep, we got that.
When does it stop becoming rock and riprap and become,
Yeah.
I need to get clarified. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Sorry.
That's a lot of reading. All right.
That was interesting.
So we will close the board's question to discussion for now and go to public hearing. And is there anybody from the public who would like to speak?
There
We know you want to speak.
There you go.
Nothing more than I want to talk about than resorts and PUDs, et cetera. Mark Lambert, Sand Lake Resort, Windermere Township. We have a resort that we've operated for 16 years. I know I've had much correspondence with the board over the years. And we're hoping to move forward with the redevelopment of that resort, likely next year, if not the following year. Boy, there's a term out there that floats around, something about some sort of show. And that's kind of been my experience, just trying to go through the zoning with the DNR and Windermere Township and Pine County. I want to start by saying that your staff here has been absolutely terrific to work with. The Planning Commission has been very helpful. Kelly, Caleb, now Mike, obviously Commissioner Ludwig has been on the Planning Commission. So everybody gets it, Administrator Mencken, and I know Attorney Frederickson. I don't think we've talked directly, but I know you've kind of been behind the scenes on this thing. So boy, I tell you, if you guys ever want an hour session on DNR and interplay between county and township, I'm the guy to call. I'll give you the quick high level for what it's worth. You know, it's I started out as a junior attorney some 30 years ago with a pretty good firm in Minneapolis. And the interesting thing that was back then, a PUD was a good thing, right? Hey, I want to bring in a PUD and let's do a contract zone. I'll give you some extra zoning over here. And in exchange for that, you give me a few pretty things and we'll build this beautiful development. And I'm just going to say it, over the course of the last 20 years, the DNR has grabbed that PUD term and bastardized it to the point that it really isn't a good thing to be pushed down a PUD hole. It's, in my opinion, as a resort operator, a bad thing to be pushed down a PUD hole. And the reason for that is that they've built in some provisions in those PUD sections that they've required the counties, townships to adopt that basically say, look, this is your density. And that density, frankly, when you do the math, is single family density. So if I have a 5-acre piece and the density in my area is 2 homes per acre, the most I will get on my PUD is 10 units. And that's what happened with Sand Lake. We have 25 units on about 4.5 acres. Our math was, well, at least 25, if not some more, to make a nice area. We're Seward, we're a beautiful spot. The DNR's kickback in this fight that I've had the last 3 years has been no, 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 no. You have PUD requirements. You can only have 9 units. So you have to take out the 25 that you have and reduce it to 9. And that was the litigation that happened. That got us to a settlement last year where basically the DNR and I agreed that we're going to build 40 units. We're working through all the nuances there, but I will tell you, and I will bet that I am about the last 40 unit resort new development that frankly, I think will ever be built in the state, because this PUD thing has been pushed through county after county, township after county, just the way Kelly and Attorney Frederickson have had to deal with it. Here's our ordinance. The DNR comes back and says, no, you can't do that. Here's our ordinance. No, you can't do that. A lot of what you have going on in here is some of that same thing. And so I take a minute of your time just to say that to you, that I'm very, very cautious about what's happening here. The other concern that I have, and this is what I've asked Kelly and Mike to help continue to work with, is in our travels, there's a little section that says, well, between the township and the county, you have to follow the more restrictive rule. And what's interesting is you think about that. On the one side, the DNR's position is, well, here's the county, here's Windermere Township. Mr. Lambert, you need to go through every section of the county and pick out, setbacks to find out which one's more restrictive. And then you have to go through the township and you have to pick out every setback and pick out which one's more restrictive. And then DNR interpretation, we have to use some of this, some of this, some of this, some of this. So instead of being governed by two or one rule, whether it's the county or the township, the DNR's interpretation is I'm governed by both. And if this setback is 10 foot for side yard, I got to follow that one. But if the rear yard's 25, I've got to follow the township. Well, frankly, it's preposterous. I don't think that that's what the state of Minnesota meant when they said you have to be more restrictive. I think generally the goal is to try to either pick one or the other. That's my interpretation, or at least something between. I'm here today just because we're not there yet with what's happening today. In Windermere Township, in my zone where I hope to rebuild this new resort, 13 million, 15 million, something like that. I am currently zoned water-oriented commercial residential. I have a residential. And generally what it was is it combined the commercial use that you have in your ordinance together with a residential use similar to your high density zone. And so what I've asked in a letter to the planning commission before this came out, and I think there was just some confusion, is that you create us one more zone in your next version that is the same zone as what I have at the township. Water-oriented commercial residential. You don't have to put it on your maps anywhere in Pine County, but if you don't help us by creating that zone that matches the current zone that I have in the township, I'm back to where we started 3 years ago with the idea that, well, now you have one zone over here and the county has a more difficult zone, so you have to match the county again. So that's my call out to help, or my ask for a buddy pass here is I support everything that Kelly and Mike and everybody has done here. I think they've done some great work. But when we get to this next version, I'd really love for the county to at least create that extra zone. You don't have to put any of the county property into it, but just knowing if I don't have that zone in your book, then I don't have it. And then you're more restrictive. And now I'm living with your zone, not the current zoning that we have there. So a little bit confusing. I understand that. But this is the DNR's approach to how to deal with this. It has to be the more restrictive of the two. Right now, what you're passing is more restrictive, and so I'm obligated to deal with your zoning ordinance relative to what my uses are where the proposed resort is. So lastly, I'd like to say, I know Attorney Frederickson's worked very, very hard, as did the Planning Commission, on just kind of some perpetual assurances that people operating this new resort that I'm building could continue to do so. I know the DNR has kicked back on just about everything that you sent, and I get it. Nobody wants to die on the hill for some of the stuff that the DNR is fighting. It frankly isn't much fun. But it is an interesting read someday if you want to chat with or talk about some of the things that have happened over there. So anyway, enough said. It's public hearing. But I would ask that you just know that ideally I'd like to come back in a couple months to see if we can't fix this little nit that we weren't able to incorporate here.
Thanks for your input.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for acknowledging our staff. They work really hard, and it's good to hear that they're appreciated for that. Thank you.
Very, very good people.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark LeBrun, Pine City. I'm not an attorney, but I am a little concerned about removing the CUP for the short-term rentals. I don't know if there's any notification to the neighbors through the permit process. I doubt it. But it seems to be a big issue. It is in our neighborhood, and I'm sure it is on a number of lakes, so just concerned about that.
Thank you.
And I apologize, what would, you elaborate more for me, please? You're looking for,
Well, the notification and the opportunity to comment as neighbors in the area, so that a lot of these owners aren't local, we don't know who they are. And so then they know who you are and they know what your concerns are.
so they
But it
didn't,
Seems to me if there's a lot of this,
yeah,
that's good. That's good government, that there has to be interaction, there has to be a process. We got one person here at a public meeting.
yeah, yeah. I know.
How many do
It's-
you get at the CUP meetings?
Yeah,
So what does that tell you? There's a big interest in it. So that's my concern. I know it's a lot of work, but is that
more like.
is that a good thing? And will a lot of this roll through eventually? So it's big right now.
Right.
When the economy turns, they're all gonna be for sale, because they won't be able to afford to keep them. So maybe that'll die off, but I think having this open process, I think is
Yeah.
more important than a quick process.
Do you like mail, the adjoining landowners like you do for forfeiture sales and
Yeah.
stuff? So they,
Yeah, so currently when it's set up as an interim use permit, yes, all the owners within 500 feet are noticed of it. One thing to note with these short-term rentals, so it is not something that we even have to regulate at all. It was something that back in 2018, we thought, oh, we should do something about this. And so we're hoping this is a happy medium in that it's, you know, they do have the requirements. We can pull their permit should they not follow them. But yes, through the new process, there is not any neighbor notification.
That's where all those rules came from, the quiet time and all that, and
Mhm.
it's all input, because some people go to work at 4 in the morning, you know, what I mean, they get a truckload of buddies come up to go fishing and rent a place for a weekend, and
sure.
it can get pretty rowdy.
Are there any other public comments? All right, we will close the public hearing. And then additional discussion for the board.
Well, the only ones I had was, like I said, that I brought up. So I guess or is that gonna be, you're gonna look into those things before we actually vote on this then, or do we vote on this and just expect it to be changed?
Yeah, so my proposal would be that we carry those forward to the next version of the ordinance and we move forward with this one today.
And then, like I said, there was a issue on Sand Lake right now between the two counties.
Sure.
One interprets impervious surface material, one definition, DNR, and then the township on the Pine County side is different. So that's just one thing that
Right, and
I can't
and-
support till I see that.
yeah, and every jurisdiction literally can choose to have their own definitions. You know, the DNR sets the minimum and you can always be more restrictive than the minimum. I don't believe that our definition isn't anything but the minimum.
Yeah, it's the same as DNRs.
Right.
So JJ,
Yeah.
are you saying that Windermere Townships is more restrictive or the county?
Carlton County actually is. It's a situation where a gentleman on the same lake within two parcels, well within
I
500 feet.
understand that
Right.
part, but who is the most, who is causing the?
Well, right now Carlton County, and we do have
So,
language here, placement of natural rock, riprap. We have language in there already, you know, calling it natural rock. But then we have a neighboring county that takes it off of the total amount of square footage of impervious surface.
So
when
is
you
it,
Use that same.
is it ours that you're saying is bad, or is it Carlton that you're saying is bad?
It's Carlton. We share the lake though.
But
Yeah.
we
It's under
can't-
the DNR, which is
can't.
under soil and water.
So do you agree with what we have in ours?
I just don't see a definition of can we get a list of impervious surface material?
Well, there
Shingles,
is, well, in
concrete.
the definition of impervious surface, we literally have a list of what we will count.
Okay, where is that?
Towards the front. Don't have the page number. It would be like page 3 or 4,
Number
I didn't
7,
see
page
it.
7.
page 7
Page 7.
of the actual ordinance. Of the actual ordinance. You're on this slideshow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Page 7 in here.
Yep. Keep going.
David?
Yeah, so there's 2.
Here you go.
7.
Oh. Something debris. Oh, there's impervious surface, okay.
And that definition is the same as the current ordinance.
Okay,
Right, and what the state rule describes it as.
okay, thank you.
So Kelly, before you go, I have a question, with the conditional use permits. Would it be helpful to send out a notice to people within, was it 500 feet? When something comes in, just so that they're aware of it?
So we had that conversation with our zoning board.
Okay.
And the zoning board felt like you're really just kind of, I mean, you're stirring the pot with nothing you're gonna do about it. Because we have it in our ordinance that they can get this administrative permit with these requirements. So then you're telling the neighbors and then telling them, but you can't do anything about it except for complain to us. I mean, what?
So maybe if I could just add, if it's listed as a conditional use, the owner has the right to do that use as long as they meet the conditions. And what the zoning board was finding is that everybody was meeting the conditions
Right.
and there weren't
Yeah,
any additional,
same additions,
right,
yeah.
and there weren't any additional conditions that needed to be added.
Okay.
So now they will get issued a permit, but there are
Right. There's still the same conditions on there.
attached to the permit, so when the neighbor is acting irresponsibly.
Yep.
You could pull their permit.
Correct. And the permits are good for 3 years. And so we review it every 3 years as well, or until the property transfers hands.
So if I own one and I sell it, it's gone.
Right. The new people have to start over.
Then a water-oriented commercial residential classification. Would we be able to, I mean, I think of Brainerd, I think of the Brainerd Lakes area, I think of places like that. That it's common. I go around Mille Lacs Lake several times a year. I mean, I even see excavators out there digging out their channels, digging right in the lake. There, you know, it seems like there's a lot going on in other lakes. And with the fact that, you know, it's already a 25 or 26 unit up there. If you do nothing, you can keep that many. If you try to improve it and do it better, they want you to take it down to 9. You can expand as long as you go backwards.
Right.
Is this something? Are we gonna be doing something like unusual or would this be allowed? Has anybody researched that? yet?
Right.
So we
So-
can just make a new zone and make this work for,
Right. Yeah, it was just something that the zoning board wanted to spend a little bit more time with. And kind of with the short-term rental thing and some of these other things, time was not on our side. And so we wanted to get this piece done and then go back to some of those more things that, I mean, we've been working on this 2 years already.
yeah,
Yeah. And drawing it out. So if we could get some done and then go back to the boxing ring on the
Sure.
rest. But like this, I don't even think this is a boxing ring item. As Mr. Lambert pointed out, we can just put in our ordinance
Yeah.
and not map anything to it and
Sure. Okay,
it's there.
got you.
I'm sure I will move
Thank you, Matt.
2024-23.
28 that was our correction.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
All right, we got a motion by Matt,
The 28th version. Huh?
I'll second it.
second by Steve. Any more questions, comments?
I will just add to that whole thing with the short-term rentals.
Mhm.
The streamlining thing frees up a lot of zoning work that can happen, better zoning work that can happen in front of the board versus that. And it still keeps track of them easier. I mean, it's, if it's a thing, like easy to get, at least we know what's going on. There's so many that are out there that we don't know are happening, but this will help that too, I think. So,
Well, and when I've sat in the meetings and watched them, what I see is even if they have a conditional use permit, it's the same steps for everything that they're gonna have to follow, whether they have a permit or a conditional
is.
use permit. And the board is really good about making sure,
Yep.
and the staff is too, about making sure that everything's gonna be followed. So, but I understand what you're saying too. Sorry. Yeah, yeah. All right, so we have a motion by Matt, a second by Steve. Once again, any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
okay.
Opposed? All right, 2024-28 has been approved.
Oh, this one confused me.
I know, me too.
My last one?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So back to the county zoning ordinance. So now with the city of Brook Park, we have 7 townships or cities that have opted into the county zoning. Those cities and townships, when they opt in, we give them a map and say, color the map, here's your crayons. Tell us how you want this to be zoned, because every zone has different requirements for setbacks, for lot sizes, and for what uses are acceptable. So those cities or townships, they draw us a map, and just like Brook Park, we go with it because, I mean, they're the ones saying, yes, please do this, and they know their areas very well. So at the last zoning board meeting, we had an application to change the zoning map. And so through the county zoning ordinance, there is a process to do that in which it goes to the zoning board. And the zoning board hears the request and then makes a recommendation to you all. So the request was in Pine Lake Township, and it was a property that, it was a 10-acre property that was currently in the rural residential 10 district. So that means it's in the rural residential 10-acre minimum lot size jurisdiction zone. And they were requesting to change it to the agricultural 4 zone. So, and the property borders that on 2 sides. So at first, at face value, it seems, this might be a reasonable request. Agricultural zone 4 means that I can have 4 parcels per 40. So I can have 4 parcels and they can go down to 2.5 acres. Because remember when we did that, it's an agricultural zone. We want to preserve those fields. So we don't want to tell them that your 40 has to be split in 4 and they have to be 10 acres because now that farmer has 4 landlords. We wanted to be able to split off the woods in the corner and things like that. So this request came before us though for a completely non-agricultural reason. So in the agricultural zone, one of the allowed uses or the conditional uses is to have 2 residences on 1 property. That is the only area in the agriculture district that's allowed, 2 separate residences. And the purpose of us allowing it there was for that generational farming. Mom and dad are getting old. Kid wants to stay on the farm and help, so then there's 2 houses. However, this request came forward because it's a 10-acre piece and mom and dad want to live in a house and kids want to have a seasonal house to be able to come to. And within their district, they currently have, they could have a duplex. So they could have like a mother-in-law apartment in the basement. They could even have like a traditional townhome type thing. They could have a guest cottage in their current district, which would be a 700 square foot or less building. So they had options for 2 dwellings in their current district, but they really wanted the 2 separate full houses. And after the zoning board considered it, they felt like this is not an agricultural property. This is not an agricultural reason we want to do this. It does not meet the purpose of the agricultural district whatsoever. And so the zoning board recommended denying the zoning map amendment, for that purpose of it doesn't meet the purpose of that district, their request, and they do have other options, just that they aren't as excited about.
I really liked that the zoning board told them what their options were,
Yeah.
you could do a townhome and have, they were really good about that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a question. So because that was brought forth by a citizen.
Yeah.
After the city of Brook Park drew the map, right? How they wanted it, right, how they wanted it zoned. What happened if someone from the city or the city had a meeting and sent a representative and said, hey, we want to change the way we zoned it?
Right.
Would we change, would that be a different outcome?
Right, so anybody can bring forward a map amendment. It's just where the discussion would go. So I would be hopeful that when it's a township or a city who originally drew the map coming back saying, hey, actually, we want it to be something different now. We would say, okay, sounds good, as long as it made sense and it wasn't something like
That's what
out
we
the
have.
wall.
Look how we change our ordinance, thing.
Yeah. And like with this one as well, we reached out to Pine Lake Township a couple times because they are who drew the map. And we really wanted their input, but we did not get any input from them. And so
Okay,
we're
that's- I did not-
Madam Chair.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
I do have a question. Because at AMC, we've had this discussion over a number of years and at the Council on Aging on allowing elderly parents to be able to be housed on property. And you said that there are some options with duplexes and up to 700 square feet.
Well, and we do have a healthcare dwelling part in our county zoning ordinance as well, that really follows kind of those statutory granny pod type regulations. So we have those options already baked into the ordinance.
So they could take one of those options.
Right,
It doesn't do what they want to do.
right. And this isn't a healthcare, like need of having family close. It's making kind of a family getaway.
I don't wanna, I just don't want us to go down that road where we're not gonna allow a parent to build a dwelling so that the kids can take care of them for the next 20 years or however long, hopefully they live.
Yeah, and we have provisions that work around with that, whether it's the guest cottage or the healthcare dwelling, or, I mean, sometimes these duplex type ideas.
All right.
When I was listening to the meeting the other day, I was hearing, one of the comments was, I don't want to change it for 1 10-acre parcel. If we're gonna change it, we need to change it for everything. And so, I was thinking that the map was gonna change for everything when I came, but hearing the rest of the discussion and knowing that they were saying these are the options that you have, and, I think that she was okay with that too. So, there was a lot of good discussion that went on with this one. So we have, the request to confirm the zoning board and reject the changes on the map for Pine Lake Township.
I'll move to support the zoning board.
Matt, thank you.
I'll second that. I think if we have those boards, if we second guess everything they do, we're not gonna have a board.
Yeah, well, in this board, I have to say, every time I've sat in, their discussion is intense. It's not just a little here and a little there. It's, they talk everything through. They do a really good job. So are there any other questions on this? All right, we have a motion by Matt and a second by Steve for the county zoning map amendment to deny that. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carried. Technology Committee report.
You want me to go or?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we met, talked about the generative AI policy. The revised policy is more concise and provides basic framework for AI use in Pine County. We just kind of had a little discussion on the importance of verifying the accuracy of the information presented by AI. The revised AI policy will be added to the electronic communication resource policy. So there was some stuff on that, the .gov email transition. We talked about rolling out how we were gonna do it, if we're gonna do it in segments or just, what was the term? Rip the Band-Aid off and,
He done with it.
and just,
I like that.
just roll, with it. What, there really ain't a lot on our side, there ain't a lot of fear on it because, our old emails will work. For at least a year, Ryan said, maybe even longer. And then once, if somebody sends it to our old email, they get correspondence back to change it to the new email. We still get it, everything like that. So it should all get rolled over, pretty easy. So on our side, or my side, the dummy side, I guess I'd say, is it should be pretty seamless. These guys are gonna do all the hard work and
There's a lot of other counties that have already gone to .gov and they have it right in their email. So if you email one of them, it says right on the top of their email, please note my email has changed too. And so you make sure, I mean, there's so many different things that'll go out there to get that done. We've done it before, we can do it again, right? Yeah,
hopefully it'll get rid of some of the stuff.
yeah.
Maybe some of the bad stuff. We'll see. And then talked about the website redesign. Ryan said he's got it finalized, is on schedule to go live September of 24. Maybe earlier, but, he said he's working on training with the staff to make sure it's a smooth transition. And then the other thing is we did talk a little bit about, Ryan's department is working on getting, everything off the AS400s, and get them to a more modern, hardware software. So that's exciting. I think they're sick of working on them things. They're trying to get them to work. So yeah. Otherwise, I don't know, Steve, if you had any.
Just one thing on the AI is I think we have to know there's gonna be more to come
Mhm.
because we're pretty early in this and we kind of got to jump on it. We do have a policy. We shortened that thing down from 1,800 pages to what, 5 or 6, Ryan? And so I think it's halfway understandable. The big fear is that somebody would use AI to create a document, somebody's personal information would end up in that document. I mean, we write documents all the time with information in, but if you're using AI, then that becomes part of the AI cloud, so to speak. And so then that information is public.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very cautious about what we're using AI for.
Yeah.
I think we've all probably used it, not known it, you know, by asking Siri or Alexa.
I went to look up a recipe today and it came up on an AI. I
Yeah.
thought, no, yeah. Are there any questions for the technology committee? All right, do we have a motion to accept the?
No.
We don't need to. Okay, Kettle River.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Mike Gainer, your Land and Resources Manager. Since 2021, Pine County has been part of a memorandum of understanding with Pine County Soil and Water District, and Paul Swanson, our district manager, is here. Along with Carlton County, Carlton Soil and Water, and Knavic Soil and Water. And we've been working towards creating a watershed management plan for the Kettle River Upper St. Croix. At this point, in order to release the 1.4 million in funds, we need to create a joint powers entity or collaborative. This group has decided to create a collaborative. So we have a Kettle River Upper St. Croix joint powers agreement that's been drawn up and reviewed by the Pine and Carlton attorneys. On May 9th, the policy committee approved adoption of the watershed plan and the first biennium budget. So as again, the joint powers agreement has been reviewed, and now the watershed partners can agree to this plan, enter into the joint powers agreement, which would replace the currently existing memorandum of understanding. And the resolution would appoint the current policy committee members, Commissioner Ludwig and Commissioners Waldem, to the same positions under the joint powers agreement. But we should note that under the joint powers agreement, the policy committee members do not need to be a member of the governing body. So I'm asking today for a resolution to adopt and implement the comprehensive watershed management plan and joint powers agreement, and to approve the first biennium budget for the Kettle and Upper St. Croix Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan.
So exciting. Does
Mhm.
anybody have any questions? If not, can we have a motion to approve resolution 2024-27 and adopt the Kettle River plan?
I'll move that.
We got a motion by Matt,
Second.
second by Josh. All right. Once again, any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
And then Mark, Trunk Highway
Just to
one.
clarify, that was both A and B.
Thank you guys for.
Oh, that
Yes.
was both A and B, right, everybody?
Yep.
Matt?
Matt. Yes.
You made the motion. That was for A and B, correct?
Yes,
Okay, we're good.
he mentioned both.
Thank you.
So we have the final agreement and resolution for Trunk Highway 123 turn back. We've had some discussion on that. It's 6.5 miles, goes from the east city limits of Sandstone, so on the east side of the Kettle River. Heads easterly for, I think, 2.5 miles, and then north for 4 miles up to Trunk Highway 23. So there's a map in there if you're not sure where that's at. We would receive a lump sum payment of $5,390,625. And I think we've kind of talked about, we would use some of that to supplement equipment purchase. And then we would have Kelly invest that in a very wise investment. Because we're looking at probably 10 years before we would use any of that money. And then another, so 30 some years from now before we would actually spend all of that money. So there'd be 2 projects over the next 30 some years. So and with the rates that are, they stay reasonably well, that interest, I assume, can come into the highway department. That'll help us with the inflation that we've been fighting and battling here for the last few years. So I think it's a win-win. The state doesn't have to maintain it. They can focus a little bit more on the higher volume roads and the freeway. So that's kind of what they go across the state and they're kind of looking at this. And, you know, they don't get a lot of people that raise their hand and say, yeah, we'll take a road, but they found a partner here in Pine County, I think, so I'd recommend approval. It's, probably won't get totally transferred until, next summer. So this winter, MinDOT would maintain it. And then they go through their whole convoluted process by the end, probably next summer, it'd be official, so.
You think they'll ever go further north from Ascov?
Further north
Give,
on 23.
right,
No, I think, you know, we've had some meetings in the past and, you know, Trunk Highway 23 is really an alternate to the Duluth. I mean, and it's scenic route and it's, you know, I don't see them wanting to give that up.
okay,
So,
I'm sure.
yes.
So, you know what, it starts like at the top of the bluff on the east side, right?
yeah, right about where that first driveway is, Chris Matrix.
What are they gonna
is close.
call, what's gonna be the name of the highway then from the split? Is it gonna all become 30, but the state's just gonna
Well,
take care of it, or?
They got rules and stuff. I'm hoping that 30 would be the east-west stretch, and then we'll have another number for the north-south stretch, possibly 29.
Yeah.
So that would be the continuation of 29 segments, so.
Silly question, but it's like otherwise 123 will be like, you know.
Yeah, when we turned back, or we received the turn back in the city of Hinckley, the east-west portion of Trunk Highway 48, that's called 61, and the north-south part's called 61, so I like to avoid that, but they said that was required, so, yeah. It's hard to know how that's gonna work out, but I think hopefully we can have two different numbers.
Any other questions for Mark?
Good job negotiating it.
Yeah. So we want to approve resolution, or we need a motion to approve resolution 2024-29
And Madam Chair, and the agreement.
and the agreement. Thank you.
I'll move that.
Thanks, Steve.
I'll second.
Thanks, Josh. Got a motion by Steve, a second by Josh. Are there any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Right.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mark. We are on to commissioner updates. Steve, do you want to take the summit since you were there through the whole thing?
I thought it was, it's always a great time to meet with other entities that are doing economic development. Jordan Zeller from the Regional Development Commission with the MC, and he did a good job of moving things along. The tribe has been a big part of our economy in East Central Minnesota, and so they kind of give us some spur on along, so to speak, because they've been able to bring partners together and do some pretty amazing things. And we had some, you know, the partners that helped put that on all gave a little talk, and certainly ECE has stepped up to the plate, and because of what they're doing, and we can't forget SCI and Midco, but we're able to move the needle. I just talked to some people this morning and they asked me, you know, when are we gonna be able to get this stuff? I said, well, do they have the fiber coiled on the pole on your street? Yes. I said, well, have you filled out the little application? Probably not. We'll do that. And hopefully before the snow flies, you'll be part of that. So and then the Great River Energy folks were also a partner, and they talked, and so it was I thought very, very well done. And I encourage as many people next year to go as possible.
I just want to add, I think the thing that really impressed me was all of the partners that were there. So you had Plain County was there, the city of Hinckley that was there, East Central Energy, Rural Development.
City of Stan's.
I mean, it was the people that came together, and the topic was daycare.
Yep.
But there was so much more that was discussed other than just daycare because they're doing so much. It was a good day. I liked, the one guy said, no one has the answer alone in this room, but together we can come up with something great. So that was my big takeaway. And actually, the next meeting is going down to county, tribal and state leadership. And that's, I read that quote there because it was one of the tribal members that read it, and we were down meeting with the 11 tribes. And how many counties were there?
Think about it.
Five-ish. And then some state leadership. And it was a very good meeting on where we're at with ICWA and some of the hardships that tribal members have dealt with, and then trying to figure out where we can go forward to make it so that you know, I don't know if we'll ever be ICWA compliant as long as we have to check boxes. I just don't know if it's ever going to happen. So they're looking at, can we look at the outcomes instead of the boxes that were checked? And Pine County was the example that was used. Once again, we had our ICWA that was done that year was a 76% because a couple boxes didn't get checked. But the outcome, you know, our human service department and Becky went way over above and beyond and made sure that grandma got her license and got everything that she needed. And so the outcome was amazing. But we got a low score. And so they used us as an example on how your outcome is really what's important and not necessarily checking the boxes. So that was a good first meeting. When we left, before we stopped that meeting, one of the tribal leaders said, we need to do this, I think he said quarterly. So, you know, just pushing the state to get that done. And then there's the new Children, Youth and Family Services committee it's not a committee, it's a department that's coming up, and Tiki Brown is going to be doing that one. And so hopefully we'll be able to get some of the tribal members at that one too. And then that will be a big step to get some more things moving. County Highway 23 Coalition.
Yeah, I sat in on that one. And the only thing I brought up, they were talking, they went over the regular stuff, financials. They talked about Klobuchar to pick up all three projects to move forward, that they were having some correspondence with her. I brought up then, they were talking, you know, about everything that they're working on that end of Highway 23. One of the persons on the coalition was bringing up the disparities in other counties and the hardships, and they even talked about the people's income and the taxation over there. And what it's gonna bring, you know, with the 4-lane highway and everything and the divided highway portions. So it sounds like a lot of this money, of course, is coming federal from what I interpreted. So I just asked, I said, when you get up north on 23, you were just making reference to 23 north of 123, and there's some poor highway conditions up there, the, you know, lack of shoulder, it's a deep drop off. And then when you get into the next county, Carlton, of course, you know, the highway, I don't know how often you've taken it, but it's still sloughing off into the Nemadji River. There's actually a well casing, a test well casing that's right off the shoulder of the road, like within, I'd call it maybe 3 feet from the fog line.
Mhm.
And this time of year with vegetation, I just hope nobody ever hits it. You know, I know there's rules and regulations, and Mark left, but we could ask him, with guardrails for, you know, you have to have guardrails protecting from, you know, bridge railings and stuff. So, I brought that up. I just said, you know, if there's any money going on down there, maybe we have some things that could be considered a little more crucial up here, you know, with the big cracks on the middle of the highway, especially motorcycle season now. You get one of those big lateral cracks running right along to that, right with that fog line and right with the yellow center line with that drop off. You know, we all know on a motorcycle how to take railroad tracks, especially tracks that might kind of run at an angle with your highway, but on a wet night, you know, I see some serious potential motorcycle injuries on that stretch. So I just asked if that could be looked, maybe some of those monies come up north a little bit for some of these.
They say.
They'd have to check into it, I guess, but
Mhm.
they seem receptive to the idea.
Okay.
You know, we're part of the coalition. It's 23 runs all the way up there also through us, and I didn't even speak for us. I spoke for Carlton County also, just because of what I see as a immediate danger, you know, with that conditions of that highway right there, right by Nemadji River.
Still my favorite highway.
Yeah, oh, it's great. I said that too.
Right.
We'll bring it up to the District 1 meeting.
Yeah, that would be great.
On
Steve.
that
Thank you.
committee Because
I just,
They've
sitting
been
on the
fighting
public
that red
safety.
clay up there forever.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's outside the box thinking, move the road. You know, I looked at it. I looked at the higher area to the, what I would call the west of there. You know, maybe it should be moved, I guess. I don't know. But right now, I just think, maybe some monies could be shifted up this direction. It's all public safety. It's public dollars.
Mhm.
So that's all I have from the Highway 23 Coalition.
All right. NLX was canceled. HRA EDA,
Want me to start that? Yeah.
I can.
It was pretty much a normal meeting. The Fenelon has one vacancy. Put my glasses on. Then it went through the normal business. It was pretty quick and pretty fast. And then we got in development projects and there's a lot of discussion. They working on trust fund guidance and the local housing trust fund thing. And then Pine County, which I think we know, but I'll say it again, Pine County got $500,000 in childcare stuff for daycares and stuff like that. So that was discussed. And then zoning issues were an issue which we've been talking about a lot. That popped up with, it always seems to put a hold on anything we do, or, you know, it's the delay, like the gentleman from Stan Lake was saying there that, you know, townships and, you know, it's just, and I think we've done a lot to help that. So, but that's always gonna be a moving target. Other than that, I don't know, there's a lot of discussion about land and development and stuff like that. And I think they someone put a question to Kelly on trying to understand the tax base and whatever, and I don't know, that's a lot of work, but just so the zoning board or the HRA board would understand how stuff is happening in the county and just have a feel for how it's happening across the county.
okay.
Yeah, on the, if I can jump in with Matt, with the childcare, there's a new childcare that we did not know at the time that's opening and starting in Willow River. So I'd stopped and spoke to them and they reached out to Leslie and Leslie got a hold of them and got them some information and, just like to compliment Leslie on that. She followed up and got a hold of them and just explained, you know, the current deed grant for childcare and how it's for Hinckley, Finlayson, Pine City, but
Mhm.
The way it sounds like there might be some monies left over. Of course, they weren't aware of the Willow River one at the time, but if it isn't all utilized here, maybe there's something she can help them with. And then on that board, on the EDA side, we have Traver and Rick. Traver, a banker with a lot of banking experience, financing a lot of these properties around here, and that's the conversation Matt alluded to. And then with Rick Lewis, a realtor, there was just some talk. I could just read what was captured in the minutes. To look at what types of properties carry the largest amount of the overall tax base, identify key indicators of economic development, and consider looking at selling tax forfeited lands to spur economic growth. And it was just a brief discussion I have, and two people with the years of experience they have through banking and through real estate, just to maybe look at this and do some sort of presentation maybe to bring to the board, and because there is a lot going on with the settlement down at the state and what has been paid out with the tax forfeited properties, tying it all into economic development.
Thank you.
Yep.
Zoning. Matt, zoning board,
Just thinking about, we discussed a big chunk of it.
a huge,
Already
yeah,
sitting in front of the board, but
we have.
I think one thing I'm gonna note is there was three main presentations to the board, and then one was the thing we just did supported the board on by not letting them change that thing. And the other two were people applying for variances for their projects, and both of the variances were approved on those projects, which I thought that's not an easy thing to do for the board sometimes, is when you have a variance and such, but you know, they thought it through and they made it all work. So I thought that's good. So, you know, the board is very thoughtful and they
Mhm.
really stick to their guns on the rules, but they can still issue a variance. There's some I wish they would have done with what they were out, not so much out of whack, cause it's some, what's 9 feet on one corner, but I'm not gonna, you know. They're their own governing board and they do a good job.
You do. You do. There was no Snake River Partnership Plan meeting, AMC District 1 meeting. Steve, do you want to talk about that one?
You want to start out? Oh,
The meeting was called to order. There
Yeah.
you go. Go for
Okay.
it. Sorry.
by a very capable chairperson.
So there was an election for the director and vice director again, and so it's the same. It's myself and Sue. So we'll still be getting that information firsthand. We talked about the forfeited land sales and what was happening with Taylor versus Hennepin. Which can't think of his name. The referee,
Matt.
nope, the referee,
From
from St. Louis
Oh,
County.
Paul McDonald.
Paul, yeah. So he was talking about how good the committee was, and I'm thinking, yes, Kelly. So they talked about that. We talked about just where things are at with that, and it's still questioned, you know, there's still, I think that, you know, it went unanimous through the Senate and through the House, which was really good. And so now we can move forward and figure out where to go with that. We talked about cannabis and where that's at, and they suggested strongly that we get together with our cities and townships, which we're doing in 2 weeks. So we're moving the ball on that. And I think that's going to be a good presentation, and we'll have our experts there, like Reese, to talk about what the laws are and what's going on with that. What else can you oh, we toured the jail, except somebody wore sandals that day. And so we had to leave. So, but we got to tour like where the courtrooms and all that are going to be, but we didn't actually get to go down to where they were still working on the jail, and that was my fault.
My takeaway from, you know, the land thing is that there is more to come.
Matt, we can hear you. Talk to Matt.
There's more to come as they sort through what really happened. We're pretty close to the end of session, and there's some nuances there, but at least there's some money set aside to hopefully hold us harmless if we had made a mistake. And
For which one? For
for the land.
the forfeited, yeah.
Forfeited.
Yeah.
Stuff. And the jail tour, it's a justice center tour.
Mhm.
The place is huge. It's about as big as our courthouse here. And you know,
Is it one level?
it's 2 levels. It's 2 levels.
Do you know where their transportation center is? We've been there for district meetings. It's right next to that.
I know.
Actually, Dave was there for the whole tour, so he can tell you about the jail part.
But the thing I was taken with is, I think they said it's gonna be about, when they're all said and done, about 25 million bucks. So to put that in perspective of, we need to do some remodeling in our jail. I'm sure glad we don't have to build a new jail. And
Well, how much did their price increase from the time that they started planning it
so
until?
9 million or something.
Yeah, it was crazy what the prices went up on it.
But I think when we go to those meetings and we talk to our fellow commissioners, we might be missing the boat on some things that we could do more cooperation on.
Mhm.
And do we all need to have stuff that maybe we don't, and maybe that's a conversation we need to have at a committee of the whole. And maybe there's some areas where we can partner with a neighboring county and,
Did you come away with a list of priorities? You know, did they do that? They have you vote on?
no,
things?
we're still talking about this session that just got over.
Okay.
They didn't, I think that's at the next meeting for the annual meeting.
Okay.
That they give that list.
Yeah.
Do you wanna add about the jail part?
Uh,
What, You can add on anything you want to add on. Let's do it that way.
Thank you. On the jail part, what struck me is having seen their design partially completed. I understand a little better some of the things that Rod is trying to do in the jail here. And going back to the old jail that was downtown prior to this one, you can see how the design requirements changed from there to our system, which is a pod system. And now the next evolution of that is really this indirect high segregation system. And so where our jail is I think it's a 1/60 ratio of staff to inmates, theirs is a 1/40. Because the supervision system is so different, given the high need for segregation.
Right. That pretty much covered District 1, right?
Yep.
Okay. State Tribal Partnership Committee, which is through the Children's Justice Initiative. I always get that one wrong, but they still trying to figure out the first phase and where to go. And that's the one where the state got a big grant from the federal government to figure out how we can keep our Native American families from what they're dealing with right now. So to keep our children in their homes, to strengthen the families and to do just things that will break the cycle that we've been seeing. And so we talked about choosing a name programs, desired intervention projects. And that's really good because there's people on there that have lived experience with where they were taken out of their home. I think when we were down at, where did we go that day? We got way down in Morton, way down south. One of the stories that one of the leaders from the, not Mille Lacs Band, but one of the band members, he told a story about how two of his siblings were taken from their home. And he said, I can't tell you today where they are, if they're alive. We never heard anything about them again. You know, we don't, maybe we have dealt with that. I don't know, but this is the stuff that they've been dealing with for years. You know, and that would be heartbreaking to know that you've got a brother and a sister out there and you have no idea if they're alive or where they are or anything. So that's the kind of stuff that this committee is working to stop. So it's still in the initial phases trying to figure out where we want to go from there. Next meeting that they have, I won't be able to be there. So Angie from AMC is going to be going. And they're going to be doing a presentation on the FRCs because they believe that the FRCs, the Family Resource Centers, are going to be a huge way to help the families.
I just have one comment there.
Yeah, yep.
All of my whole career working in the county, George LeFave, who passed away, he's gone now,
Yeah.
was always the grandpa. It didn't matter which family I had, but when we had problems and stuff, he was always the guy who came and got the kid, even when it wasn't his
Right.
family relation. But so people like that mean a lot to the community, and I don't know if anyone else is replacing him, you know, out there, who is the elders that do that thing. But he was always the one who would drive down to the Pine City or down to the jail, and always was helping.
When we were down in Morton, one of the gentlemen told a story. Was he from Fond du Lac? He was from Fond du Lac, and he was saying that some of his relatives died, and he said, you know, I was like an uncle, but he took them and he said, I have to postpone my retirement because I now have two little kids again. And he, you know, so the things that they are doing to change, and just how he stepped up in the stories that he told, it's amazing.
It's important in that what we have to do within the county to have that people that step up to the plate and help us do our job too.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep, exactly. So it's exciting to see, you know, and that committee too is tribal leadership, it's state representatives, it's county representatives. So people that are coming together to say, how can we work together to fix the situation? Because we know it's a problem. Central Minnesota EMS.
Well, once they made it through the road detour and it's 110 miles to get there one way.
Where'd you have to go?
But I made it on time. And I really wanted to be there in person because of what's been happening but I came away from the meeting feeling kind of frustrated. But it legislative created a new entity, which used to be the EMSRB, and it kind of had fire departments and ambulances and everything. Well, they broke it all out to just EMS ambulance. So that sits there now as the entity, and the funding that the region is gonna get is reduced, but it sounded like the regions are still gonna be intact. But they're not 100% sure yet how that's gonna unravel. And so, so I'm asking questions, and well, we really won't know the final, how the dust settles, if I could use that word, until like January of 2025, which is, you know, a few months away. Cause they're still working some things through, you know, so I asked Dave if he would reach back or try to, I will also try, but somewhere, you know, through AMC or the state people, wherever, to kind of keep us posted on that, just so we know what's going on. And the rest of the meeting was pretty much spending the training dollars, and I always advocate for the small fire departments, our Willow River, Finlayson's, Carrick's, that for our deputies, they're always on scene a half hour before anybody else, you know.
Right.
And I don't want to lose that. So there's some training dollars there. And there's two funds. That's what's going to change too. That training dollars we're going to spend down on it, and because the state, there might still be two funds, but what they're doing is they don't want to, they think people might be double dipping, which doesn't happen. But you know, some people access another fund and some people go through EMS and things like that. And the Naloxone grant still has like $47,000 left, and that usage is still high. And the medical director gave a short report, but much more pointed this time on. And I always come from my perspective, is the initial first response, because that's where you're going to save a life. And that's where the naloxone happens, you know, and it's going to be, sometimes it's family members who are share, you know, have it for safety, but usually it's our deputies, firemen, people like that. Because one kid might make the silly mistake, you know, his first time ever. But anyway, we've been down that trail. But so that discussion, he went on to, what's the next step? You know, we keep saving them and saving them and saving them, but there's nothing out there. There's the treatment centers aren't so good. There's a whole new thing happening there, and we're getting bombarded with the drug, and the mixes are getting crazy. The fentanyl's getting stuck in there, you know, more of some of that stuff too. So the higher doses and other things. And so it'll be with us for a while.
Do they ever talk about the fentanyl strips and what the usage is for those?
Those strips?
Yeah, the fentanyl ones?
Yeah. You have to use water. It's like the drug test, you know, it's a litmus paper
Right.
thing, but you still have to dilute it with water and stuff. And how many of those people are gonna safely say, it doesn't tell you, it can say, yep, there's fentanyl in here, but it doesn't tell you there might be enough to kill an elephant in there.
Yeah.
You know, it just says it's present, so it doesn't, they don't know how much is present. So
True.
some people still take it. He brought that up too. It doesn't, you know, it's not quantitative. It'll just say, it gives you a presence of the drug, but.
Okay.
I have a question for Matt, maybe even Reese could hop in on this if he can. The opioid settlement monies, are your smaller fire departments like we talked about in the small communities from, you know, Willow, Finlayson, Sturgeon, all the way on through, are they gonna be directly involved with disbursements of that? Are they gonna have say in it? Or is it distributed equally?
I think with the opioid dollars, and the Reese is probably a better person, it's directed on how it can be spent. A lot of it has to be spent on education and, you know, that kind of stuff. I don't think the public safety dollars and the training for naloxone, that's gonna come from a different side. You know, that's more reach out to kids and up the public, and that's the simplest way I look at it, but.
Yeah, and I can add just a little bit of framework to that. So the opioid settlement money goes to counties, and then there's a handful of the larger cities, but most cities are not in the settlement. And then Pine County has designated the Chemical Health Coalition as the board that's overseeing those expenditures. And so they discuss projects at that level. And so if there's ideas for how to spend the money or things that could be considered, the Chemical Health Coalition will be the place to send
So
those.
that'd be a place to direct our first responders, fire departments and stuff, send them to.
Yeah,
the-
and then as Matt was saying, there are requirements in the settlement. I don't know off the top of my head what
Sure,
may or
how
may
to
not
spend
be
it.
eligible for a fire department.
And when you've heard me talk about before, there's that, the OD report thing, so, and I know our deputies are doing it, and they still keep that record, like, if you go to a call, they just have they can just do a thing in their phone and ticks where it is, so they have mapping, so it gives a map of where it's happening too, which kind of helps whenever you get the data put in front, of you, this is where we have a hot spot, right? So, that type of thing, but
Thank you.
it's hard. People are so mobile and drugs are so mobile.
It is hard. So the next thing I've got is the NACO Finance Pension and Intergovernmental Affairs. And a big part of the conversation was they are trying to get Congress to sign, it's called the Safer Banking Act. And I think it used to be called the Safe Banking Act, but now they changed it to Safer because it has to do with cannabis. And the money that if I go to buy cannabis, I have to pay cash for it. And so they've got large numbers of cash sitting there, which is getting people to have robberies and it's just dangerous. So they're trying to get Congress to look at different ways, if you could pay with a credit card or whatever to make it so that it's not, it's just safer if they don't have all that cash sitting there. So I've got the Safer Bill Act, if anybody wants to read it. Somebody from Colorado was on the call and she said that they are dealing with the cartel and everything else out there. She said it's gotten really bad and it's really expensive for the counties because the counties have so much that we have to do to make sure that it's done right and that it's done safe. So she just said it's with all the cash being there, the cartels are crazy. So she said she's really hoping that that can get passed. That was the big conversation from that one. And then I have one other, and it was the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. We met with them. We were meeting with them to figure out next steps with Melanie retiring and getting the new chief executive, Virgil, in, just where things are going to be, because we don't know where he stands. We don't know what his thoughts are. We don't know if he's bringing in new people. I mean, we really don't know. And so Sheena's advice was hang tight. Like I wrote it down, hang tight. We are going to be meeting on the 17th of this month. And hopefully we'll be able to get Harry there, who is the District 1 director, and see what he can say. And so we'll see what's going to happen with that. It would be nice if we could get Virgil there too, but I don't know where that's at right now. Do you have anything else from that one that you can think of? Yeah, it was just trying to figure out what ifs and really there's no figuring out what ifs until it happens. So does anybody else have any others?
Well,
Yeah, we got finance.
finance and investment.
Oh, I did that as part of my FICA, yeah, okay, sorry.
We met this morning and just briefly, our reserve funds are sitting pretty good. And we talked at the strategic plan about having, every fund have a balance and we'll get there. But I think the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna send out an RFP and look at maybe a single broker to invest our money, in our CDs, so to speak. Magic Fund is that liquid fund that we can put money in that we need to get to make cash flow and all that. And right now they're paying really well, paying more than anybody. The problem is if the Fed market goes down, that goes down immediately the same day. So we kind of want to spread that money around and get it in some 3 to 5 year investments probably.
Okay,
We
sounds like it was a good meeting.
yeah. We're gonna meet again in
August.
August, so hopefully we'll have something by then to bring back for the board to react to for a broker.
Okay.
We're very limited of where we can invest our money because of our public status, so. Anyway,
Are there any others?
yeah, East Central Solid Waste met yesterday because our normal meeting would be next Monday, but Chisago County is hosting AMC that day. And so we moved the meeting up, paid our bills, basically. We're on track to have a RFP out, and we've got a meeting scheduled for the 17th to award the bids for that RFP. The people that came to the pre-bid meeting are people we're familiar with that have either worked there before or done works for our county. So they're all reputable contractors. So we're looking for, because we need that cell completed by about October. Because that's when we're gonna run completely out of space.
This October?
This October.
Wow. We drove by it the other night and Jerry said, that was his first comment was, wow, look at how huge. It's like, I know they're running out of room.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that close. Any others? Okay, we are going to we're gonna go into closed meeting to discuss. Oh, a quick recess first. Or no, we're gonna close the meeting and then do a quick recess.
Good idea.
Okay, so we are going to go into closed meeting to get information only for labor negotiation update for the IBEW, representing the Community Health Services Administrator. So we're in closed meeting, but let's take a 5-minute recess.
If you want to go into closed meeting, you've got to do a resolution.
Okay.
Motion, I'm sorry, do that.
Okay. So this meeting will be closed pursuant to MS 13D.03. If the board desires to close the meeting, the following motion should be considered. I move to close this meeting as provided by the Minnesota State Statute 13D.03 to consider strategy for labor negotiations, including negotiation strategies and development, discussion, and review of labor negotiations proposals pursuant to Minnesota statutes 179A.01 to 179A.25. And it is for information only.
You made did you make it or?
Nope, I don't make
Okay.
motions.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so I got a motion by Josh, a second by Steve. All those in favor?
All right.
Opposed? Motion carried. So we will take a 5-minute break. Right. We're back in session for our regular meeting and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending.